Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 30th of December 2023. I am so late today, goodness me. We all slept in at home here. I think I've been burning the candles at both ends. I took my boy to ice skating, one of my twins to ice skating last night for a late night sort of disco ice skate. And then while he was doing that with his mate, I popped round to a friend's house to have a cup of tea and just chat. I hadn't seen for some time. And he was like, "What are you doing for New Year's Eve?" I was like, "When's that? Oh my God, I've not even, I'm thinking about Ukraine so much that I forgot that it's actually New Year's Eve tomorrow. And have nothing planned. I mean, on the one hand, none of my mates have asked me to do anything. So yeah, screw them. But on the other hand, normally we organise something. We just not got around to it this year. I'm going to sit and watch TV for New Year's Eve. Oh, well. Anyway, that's enough of that preamble nonsense. Let's go to where we normally cite Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. And just to let you know, I'm doing a separate video for an analysis, for just a short analysis of all the missiles that hit yesterday, or the strike that hit yesterday. And I think it would have bogged down this video. I had it set up for this news video now, but there was too much content, so I'm going to record that after I do my news videos. Anyway, 750 personnel lost, 16 tanks, 20 APVs. Again, as I've said last week, really, it indicates that the Russians are on the attack still, although 750 is fewer troops lost in terms of the Russian personnel. It is still fairly high, and those numbers of tanks and APVs are high. 17 artillery systems is also a sore loss for the Russians, although not as high as we have seen it. It is still significant. One MLRS, multiple launch rocket system, one anti-aircraft warfare system. Don't know what they are, although I do have video footage of an OSA being blown up by HIMARS. So that's an air defense system, an older Russian one. It could be that one, but they did lose a number yesterday, so I just don't know what they were. And then, as you can see, 15 drones and 88 cruise missiles added onto the list from that big wave that took place the night before. Again, that won't be it's often not a good indicator in some sense, because they have a cutoff point, and often the drones and missiles are still going as they have the cutoff point. And also they're often, well, not also, often that means that the drones and missiles you see on this list are from the night before, not last night, but the previous night. So I kind of ignore these numbers and concentrate on the other ones. 29 vehicles and fuel tanks and 6 pieces of special equipment. Obviously still problematic for the Russians there, although not as high as we have seen it on previous days. Okay, so the TLDR of that is, the conclusion is basically another bad day for the Russians, although it sits somewhere in the mid to upper reaches of the range. Then we can look at other bits of information coming out. So the Russian webpage Independent Television of Sevastopol released news that 74 Russian sailors were killed during the attack and destruction of Novocherkassk. 27 more got injured. They cite official channels of the Black Sea Fleet. Shortly after releasing the news, the Russian page got deleted. Attached, you will find screenshots of the original page and a translation. And there's also a leaked document. So this is a separate thing. We're going to come on to that now. So, Novocherkassk update. The damages inflicted on a large ship of Novocherkassk of the Russian Black Sea Fleet resulted in the death of 74 sailors, and an additional 27 were injured. And you think, how they got hold of this official letter? Well, Ukrainian hackers claim Ukrainian strike on the Russian ship killed 74 soldiers or sailors. Ukrainian hacker group Cyber Resistance claimed on the 29th that it intercepted an email from the Russian Black Sea Fleet's press service saying that Ukraine's strike on the Russian ship killed 74 and injured 27. So that looks to be the official line, actually, or not the official line. I mean, they're spinning it with, no one, hardly anyone killed, one security guard, and people still missing. But it appears that the official figures behind the spin equate to 74 sailors lost, which is a huge loss for the Russian sailors in Crimea. In Crimea, in this case in Feodosia. Journalists have confirmed the deaths of more than 40,000 Russians in Ukraine. So this is that bare minimum, that absolute sort of benchmark minimum that we can say, right, there are at least this many Russians dead, and almost certainly far, far more, but these are the ones that have been registered on social media and have been really explicitly connected to the war. So this is the work of Mediadzona and BBC Russia. They together have gone through social media, and they have quite tough criteria. So if someone's died and you think they've almost certainly died on the front line, if it's not been officially stated that their death is connected to the war and they died on the front line, then they are not counted, even though you're like 90% sure that person died on the front line. So this is like quite tight. There are quite tight criteria here to allow the numbers to be calculated. So they are saying that 40,599 soldiers were killed in Ukraine. So that's an uptick from previous calculations. Based on data from open sources, 1,175 Russian soldiers have been killed in the last 2 weeks alone. Now, I don't think this includes DPR and LPR, so the militias in Ukraine, and I'm not sure about Wagner. I keep forgetting whether it does include Wagner. So this is your absolute minimum, and then you have your range going up to probably the most fanciful that people say. And to be fair, the Ukrainian general staff figures are going to be up there, and then somewhere in the middle is going to be an accurate number. But quite how we work out what that accurate number is, I don't know. But this is still really useful, a really useful exercise, because when the Russians come out and say whatever they would claim, I mean, they haven't claimed for a long time how many they've lost. It's not useful for them to do so in terms of public messaging. But if they were to make a claim, you can guarantee it would be somewhere below that, in which case you could say that is a lie. There's an open lie that you have lost that many, because we know for a fact, as far as we can establish facts, that more have died. That's what I would predict would happen. And then this bit of footage I think is useful to share with you, although I think I can share this actually. There's nothing dodgy about this, because actually these are Ukrainian soldiers showing you how to do war properly, which is a Russian unit is flushed out, and they're taken POWs. None of them are shot. And I'm showing you this, and I know I can be accused of cherry picking data here, but I haven't seen any video footage of Ukrainians committing war crimes in the last couple of weeks. And I have seen, I think, 3 bits of footage of Russians committing war crimes, of shooting. No, I've seen 4. I've seen 2 of POWs being shot, just laid out on the ground, like, in this kind of situation you see on the video in front of you, where the Russians have laid the Ukrainian POWs on the ground and shot them. I've seen 2 separate pieces of video footage of Ukrainians being used as human shields and then shot and killed. So the Russians, it appears to me, are committing war crimes, and the Ukrainians, it appears to me, aren't. Now, I've explained before how hopefully this shows just a moral difference between the two sides, but also there will be a pressure, and you can bet your bottom dollar the Ukrainian command hierarchy are saying to all their soldiers, whatever you do, do not commit war crimes. Not only because it's morally bad to do so, but if this is caught on camera, we will lose aid from abroad. We will lose the moral high ground. So it's both a moral obligation not to commit war crimes, but it's also a practical obligation in terms of kind of messaging to the outside world and continuing to receive aid on account of the fact that you guys are the good guys. So both those things are going to be happening. And what that means is that the Ukrainians are generally doing things by the book, and the Russians aren't. What is it we're up to now? 160,000 registered war crimes? It's just absolutely horrific. And there's more and more evidence coming out of these on a daily basis. German investigators just found out some more evidence of exactly which Russians committed some war crimes. I think it was in Bucha or somewhere else. No, Hostomel recently. So, there is evidence being compiled, analysed, synthesised all the time. And it doesn't look good for Russia. Okay, rebellion in the ranks of Russia's mill bloggers, it seems, says Tim White. And it finally looks like some shyster is sticking to Teflon Teplinsky, the greatest general Russia currently has, scare quotes, scare quotes. Here's the original translation of the post as Ukraine expands its bridgehead in Krinky. I don't know if Ukraine has expanded its bridgehead, but it hasn't been defeated, I think is a more accurate interpretation. And here we have, I'm just going to pick out a few bits here. People, mill bloggers having a go at Teplinsky, and he was supposed to be a really good, or one of the better generals. He was then he's put in charge of the VDV and of the regional sort of Dnipro group operating around Krinky, and he has basically not done a very good job. And now he's getting a lot of outright criticism. Let's face it, in fact, Teplinsky has had no success during this time. We suffered huge losses in equipment and personnel during numerous assaults. So this is why I'm including this here. This is evidence from Russian mill bloggers that they have lost huge amounts of personnel and equipment in the Dnipro River area. We know this because it's been caught on huge amounts of drone footage. But just in case you're a Russian troll, and more conversation about that in a minute, here we have Russians admitting this. But the enemy's bridgehead in Krinky was still not eliminated. So at all this time, Telegram channels controlled by the general lied almost every day that the enemy was being squeezed out, the village was being cleared, and the bridgehead was almost liquidated. And besides this, all of Teplinsky's failures were attributed to Makarovich's, so that's the person he took over from, difficult legacy, and to, quote, local commanders. Teplinsky himself constantly lied in the reports to the general staff and the defense ministry, and introduced the shameful practice of officer assault detachments, which naturally did not do anything good. Let us repeat that you can be a good company commander and a good colonel administrator, but to become a good general commander, you need talent. But Teplinsky, unfortunately, doesn't have it. There are only inflated ambitions and exorbitant ambition for the sake of satisfying which he is ready to devour any subordinate and deceive any boss. Teplinsky's resignation from the post of commander of the Dnipro main unit is the only way to finally restore order in our direction. Otherwise, the horror of the senseless massacre of our attack aircraft in Krinky will continue endlessly. There's a real damning indictment of Teplinsky there and the situation for the Russians in and around Krinky. Now, I showed you this video yesterday. This is just evidence of more destroyed equipment around Krinky. It's a bit of a graveyard equipment. This is just a short kind of anecdotal piece of evidence to just give you some indication that there's an awful lot of civilian vehicles that have been destroyed that are moving troops and equipment around, Bukankas, SUVs, and then some Kamaz trucks and whatnot. So, yeah, it's difficult for the Russians around here. Everything is spotted from the air, and that's the same for the Ukrainians. But the difference is the Ukrainians only have troops hiding in some rubbled, destroyed buildings around Krinky. They don't have any mechanized equipment, and so all the Russians can do around Krinky is destroy 200 to 300 troops. Whereas the Ukrainians, if they succeed in doing that, whereas the Ukrainians are evidently destroying huge amounts of equipment and that many troops and some easily. So it's not a good look for the Russians in that area. Other areas that they are suffering, I showed you this video in my frontline update yesterday, or at least referenced it. Another column stopped by Kupiansk, or another assault, where the Ukrainians destroyed 2 tanks and a bunch of armored fighting vehicles around Yehidny in that northeastern axis. Just if you were to go east of Kupiansk at the top, as it doglegs down, that's where Yehidny and Ivaniska are. So the Russians have lost, multiple columns around Sinkivka, where it is absolutely just a catastrophe for the Russians, and they've lost a bunch of equipment further to the east. Now, Andrew Perpetua on his live stream last night, is a really good live stream last night, really fascinating insight into what's going on the front line, but also a great evaluation of the drone and missile attacks from yesterday and the night before. Really good analysis there, but he shows that talks again about how Sinkivka has been an absolute catastrophe for the Russians, and they have got precisely nowhere. Although the front line looks bad for the Ukrainians, it is actually seeming to be grinding to a bit more of a halt. Places like both Avdiivka and Bakhmut, Andrew Perpetua is saying that the Russians have stopped attacking so much and appear to be, although the bad news is they appear to be building up forces for subsequent attacks. So, good news, but maybe bad news. And it's not all great. Of course, it's not all great for the Ukrainians. They're under a heck of a lot of pressure. This is in the sort of Terny area, just to the west of Crimea, abandoned, and I've talked to you about these vehicles before, about these Leopard 2, is it Leopard 206? I thought they're 205s. These are the Stridsvagn 122, these Swedish version Leopard 2s, abandoned Ukrainian vehicles somewhere at the front, looks like Bergerpanzer 3s, and I think Ukraine have now lost all of the Bergerpanzer 3 ARVs, armoured recovery vehicles that they've been given. And then a bunch of Stridsvagn 122 have been lost in the area. If it really is Bergerpanzer 3, Ukraine has lost all of this type provided by partners, 2 from Germany, 1 from Canada. Okay, only 3 of them, but still, I think they're the most recent version thereof. They've got some Bergerpanzer 2s, I believe. Both previous losses were destroyed, according to Oryx. And so, anyway, the point of this is that, Andrew talked about this on his live stream last night, that the Ukrainians tried to withstand the Russian assault with these tanks. I think just with these tanks, and they didn't succeed. So they have lost some of those in that particular area. And then we have, as I said, mentioned this OSA that was destroyed by HIMARS, a very direct hit. This was discovered by a Ukrainian drone, directed a fire so that a single Gimlers from a HIMARS precisely hit the target. And this is where we are seeing Gimlers being used just for individual targets along the front line and along the contact line or nearby, showing you that actually HIMARS are now being used really for what they were kind of designed for, which is a replacement of artillery. More expensive, but then more precise. One shot, one kill, job done. Rather than as they were used at the beginning of the conflict, beginning of when they were given to Ukraine, where they were used to take out depots and troop accumulations much further behind the front line. And then, of course, Russia moved all their depots and barracks and whatnot to outside the 84 kilometer, basically from, they moved them 100 kilometers behind the front line. And so HIMARS now are going around degrading all sorts of equipment that then, lead to stats like this. But with the knowledge that, 40% of those stats are actually coming from drones. And then there was this news that, again, I reported yesterday in my frontline update that a 22 M3 long-range strategic bomber was lost over Kursk. And it went out of radar, it just disappeared off the radar. And there are lots of rumors about how it happened. So Trentelenko was talking about, he did a massive thread on how it could have been S-200 being shot with a resurrected S-200, an old air defense system, SAM, surface-to-air missile system. And then he talks about that. But actually, he then says at the end, but it's still more likely that it was something like, friendly fire, mechanical failure, radar malfunction, or so on and so forth. There are lots of reasons, a long list of other reasons before it gets to the Ukrainians shooting it down. But one of the theories is, and I think there's a bit of a misinterpretation of how this guy responds, but he's asked whether it was shot down by a Bayraktar. So a Bayraktar with, I would presume, air-to-air missiles on board. So that is one of the theories going around. But that's not exactly what he said, even though some people say it is what he said. Nonetheless, that is a theory that's going around. So the caveats are, I don't know whether that has been shot down, but there are lots of rumors going around that it has been shot down or lost, and it certainly disappeared from radar. So who knows exactly what happened? Maybe the truth will come out. I mean, it'd be great if air defense systems were placed along that northern border in the way that Patriot was for that short time and took out 6 airframes or whatever it was back in May 2023. Moving on to distant strikes, we have 5 drones taken out of the skies by air defences during an attack that only had 10 drones. However, that is only a 50% success rate, and that means 5 drones hit their targets. Now, I will do an analysis, as I've mentioned, of the previous night's massive attack, to quote a bit of Bristol trip hop. There is a question, I guess, over what they're doing sending 10 drones. Again, it does appear that they've been using drones to navigate their way through or find safe paths through the air defense network. And then the missiles sent last night followed the drone paths from previous incursions. And that led people like Andrew Perpetua who are tracking these to go, oh, they're sending drones. These whatever it is. I don't know how he tracks them live or whatever, but he says these are drones, and then they explode, and it's like, oh no, that wasn't a drone, that was a missile, but it was totally following a drone path. So it does appear that they are using these drones to sound out safe paths for their missiles and eventually their missiles, right? But subsequent to the massive drone and missile attack yesterday, there were further missiles sent into Ukraine. Here, some X-22s or 32s are sent into Ukraine from Kursk. Ministry of Defense of Russia last night said themselves that 32 drones, Ukrainian drones, attacked the territory of the Russian Federation, and they claim that all of the drones were allegedly shot down and intercepted over the territories of Bryansk, Oryol, Kursk, and Moscow regions. This is almost certainly false, because there were some massive explosions caught on camera that are far more plausibly explained by the Ukrainian drones hitting their targets rather than being shot out of the air. I don't know if I can show them, but I will reference them and you can check them out. They'll be, all the links will be in the description below. At the same time, 3 American HARMs, so these are missiles that are sent towards sources of radiation, so they take out air defense launchers, or more probably air defense radar systems attached to the launchers. Anyway, 3 HARM missiles were shot down over Belgorod region, and the Russian Ministry of Defense reported this afternoon, air defense systems shot down 3 US-made HARM anti-radar missiles over Belgorod. In addition, a Ukrainian drone was shot down over the Bryansk region. Department said, well, actually, it ended up being more than that. So there are local channels in Belgorod region of Russia report explosions. Obviously, they claim air defense is working. Those are big explosions, as you can hear. Belgorod Air Defense self-inflicts. So this is an example of an air defense missile being shot. So you can see this is an air defense system over to the right, and you can see it subsequently fires another one that goes more directly up. This one goes almost horizontally and then comes down over here. So, you know, you can imagine them claiming that's a Ukrainian drone, but there's a big explosion over there. And then afterwards, another air defense missile goes up in the correct trajectory. So, bit of a self harm there from the Russians. And then here we have a Bryansk explosion in Bryansk, which is massive. Would suggest that isn't air defense, although it could be, but it doesn't particularly look like it. It looks like a successful strike, but it's hard to tell. But it is a significant explosion in that area of Russia, Bryansk there. And then on the other hand, Kherson yet again took an absolute beating yesterday. It's a city under massive shelling from Russian artillery and Shahed drones. So they're now sending Shahed drones directly into Kherson. This appears to be something of a new... I'm sure it's been hit by Shaheds before, but they've been using them against the front line basically since aviation has stopped working around there, VKS, Russian aviation, because of those Su-34 shot down. They've been replacing what they were doing, which is releasing these guided glide bombs I believe, with Shahed drones, and they are wreaking quite a bit of havoc on the front lines and on the settlements around Kherson and Kherson itself. And there is a lot of imagery coming out of Kherson showing consequences of the night attack by these Shaheds. The administrative building was destroyed, 2 high-rise buildings, 7 cars damaged, etc., etc. So again, Kherson is a place that, well, as I mentioned yesterday, is a Russian city according to the Russians. So therefore it's full of Russian civilians, and it is one of the places that getting most of the attention from Russian munitions. Russians are, I guess, killing their own. You know, that's liberation, isn't it? It's a horrible place to live, and I can't imagine that many people want to remain living there at the moment. You'd want to be getting out there, which is so sad because it was liberated with such joy by the Ukrainians, by the people living there. They were so hopeful about the future. Among the destruction in Kherson overnight, the offices of Ukraine's ombudsman, Dmytro Lubinets, leads the attempt to return the children stolen by Russia, for which Putin is an indicted war criminal. I don't know whether this is the intended target, whether it was just the administrative building, or whether they're like, this is where they organize getting children back to Ukraine from Russia, so this is where we're going to hit. I don't know the situation there, but nonetheless it has been hit, and you know, this just depresses me how Russia go about, you know, liberating their country, right? What they see as their country, right? Of course it's not, it's Ukraine, but their idea is, hey, we're liberating our country and we're doing that by reducing it to rubble and killing its civilians. Just what are you doing? Anyway, moving on to other bits and pieces. Mass poisoning of Russian war criminals here. Quote, an attempt at mass poisoning of our fighters was recorded in the northern military district, Kherson direction and Zaporizhia direction. A search is now underway for everyone involved in this failed sabotage. It is possible that such actions will be held in all Russian-controlled territories. We strongly urge all personnel of the Russian armed forces to refrain from purchasing alcohol through local suppliers who may secretly cooperate with the Ukrainian special services. In the current situation at the front, the enemy will use any methods to undermine the combat effectiveness of our units. Therefore, more than ever, it's necessary to remain vigilant and always be ready to complete the assigned task. So it looks like a bunch of alcohol was poisoned, and that the intention was that Russian troops would get hold of that alcohol and be poisoned. Right, update from Russia's pathetic aviation industry, says Tim White rather kindly. An Aeroflot flight from Dubai to Moscow has been delayed over 14 hours due to a broken wheel. Meanwhile, the Utair Moscow to Kogalim flight made an emergency landing in Surgut due to an engine failure. So although that might seem minor, and there may be the occasion here where this is what you'd expect anyway, the sort of stuff that normally happens, but actually these statistics, I'm pretty sure, would show that the Russian aviation industry is in free fall at the moment, and they are in all sorts of trouble due to the sanctions on parts and the lack of maintenance that has been agreed by these plane manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus, so on and so forth. Right, I'm going to leave you then today in this first video with just a little warning about one. Bots are out on force. Trolls are out on force. We know this. We've seen it. I've seen this on threads. So last week they have gone mental. There are more Russian bots than I've seen trolls than I've seen for an awful long time. Be warned. I've deleted a couple of comments that are just outright trolls because I'm just a little bit fed up of, and this isn't kind of like overt censorship. This is like, I am censoring lies, right? Or just insults, lies and insults to me, because like, this is my house and deal with it. And I know some of you will be like, free speech, but also allowing free speech plays into the hands of Putin and his disinformation project. So if you want Putin's cronies and Putin's entities and to succeed, if you want his trolls to find purchase, then fair enough, free speech is cool. But if you want to try and fight in this disinformation war against disinformation, it is exhausting just constantly trying to rebut the content of what they say, because they're not interested in good faith dialogue. They're not good faith actors. They're not saying something and then you then put their lies straight and they go, oh yeah, you're right. Oh yeah, sorry. Turns out that I got my facts a bit wrong, but you're actually right, and you've used really good reasoning to do that. They don't give a damn. They're being paid to do that, to spread that nonsense, and it's just water off a duck's back. It's like they'll either ignore any response and just go on to the next lie, or they'll hit that lie with some kind of mocking further disinformation about you loving Nazis or something. So it's like, you could leave it there, but I just think it tarnishes good faith conversations that are happening. I do get a lot of criticism from people, and there's a lot of criticism that I leave up there because you know what? It comes from people who are nuanced or who have an issue with some of my political conclusions, and there's good faith, hopefully good faith political dialogue to be had. But I know those are different to the trolls, and those trolls, if you're a paid up member, then it's effectively like having a Russian soldier, except instead of fighting with weapons, they're fighting with lies. And I don't want Russian soldiers on my threads. I want to eliminate those soldiers effectively, and this is how we do war in the information space. And I am going to shut down, so not all trolls, so like some, is it arbitrary? Maybe, but we are being overwhelmed at the moment, and so I'm going to shut down some of those voices because they are dangerous. They're just outright dangerous. It's really interesting. I'm getting loads of comments on this to suggest that there's a massive uptick in this activity. So I really, really wish Google would fix the Russian bot issue on YouTube. On mainstream media outlets, in particular DW, BBC, etc., within 2 minutes of posting, there are like 30 pro-Russian posts upvoted to 30 plus each and any time I tried to respond to any of them. No matter how civil my response is, it's immediately shadow banned. So there is a problem here. Loads of you are saying your comments are being deleted. And of course, I'm not deleting those comments. I've not deleted anything other than Russian trolls forever, right? I've just not deleted anything. So these are being deleted, one might think by the algorithm, but I think the system, yet again, like with my whole channel when it was taken down for a week, is gamed by Russian trolls, where they possibly downvote your comments, report your comments so much that the algorithm just takes over and deletes them because it thinks that they're somehow egregious, but they're not. They're just like normal arguments about what's going on or defending particular positions. And you guys are complaining, why have I had this many comments deleted today? And it is happening. You guys are complaining about it all the time. And I think the system is being gamed. So possibly complain to YouTube. That might be a good thing. And the problem that you find is this kind of gaming the system is only done by one side. And I'm not advocating you go and game the system and report all the Russian bots, but I don't know if that's a good thing to do. But where like my channel was reported so often by Russian trolls that YouTube took action, took it down for a week, and I'm like appealing, like, what have you taken it down for? You haven't told me. I don't know where it was in the video. You've got an issue, and you haven't told me exactly what I've done wrong. And all that issue that happened last year, that so many of you supported the channel over, and I really appreciate that. Still, Jan Narkowicz, absolute legend. But what happens is the Russians do, because they've got whole troll farms, the Internet Research Agency, employing people to go and do that. We don't do that. Pro-Ukrainian people are decent, normal people existing individually in houses and apartments around the world. We don't go, right, we've been ordered by our boss to go and absolutely pile on this pro-Russian channel and report, and, downvote. We've not been employed so we don't go and do that because we're decent human beings, right? And what that means is the pro-Russian channels and the pro-Russian trolls have their comments and their content remain up there because there's no concerted effort, there's no insidious effort to remove it. And yet the Russians work as a cabal, as a team, as a kind of a disinformation project from the Kremlin to do that to us. And so it's very asymmetrical. Anyway, here this commenter says it's insane how out of control it is, and I agree. Between this and pro-Ukrainian YouTubers routinely being taken down, Russia really is dominating the information space, and it's concerning. So there have been videos released again by reporting from Ukraine, Warthog Defense having issues, all of us having our own individual issues with comments and me getting demonetized so often, and etc. etc. This is a big challenge, right? And I just thought I'd leave you with part of Andrew Perpetua's live stream last night that kind of brings that into a larger strategy, possibly, of the Russians. See what you think.
So what I see happening right now is it appears to be that the Russian offensive took a whole bunch of ground, like in some areas, several kilometers, like in a few areas, it's like 6 or 7 kilometers of ground that they took. But now it's completely stalled under heavy casualties. And then they launched a large bot attack, like propaganda bots, like a troll farm. They've launched a large troll farm stuff all week. It's been noted all week, especially today, especially bad today, obviously, but for the whole week they've been activated, and they launch this large missile attack. So I'm curious, do you think the missiles and the trolls could be connected to this slowdown on the front?
Interesting question.
That's my question. I don't know, but
I have doubts.
you have doubts.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's much more like this is, in Russia, the New Year is really big. Also, the ship that was sunk recently, it probably took the preparation for this missile attack. Took exactly the time it passed since that ship was destroyed. I think it's.
And I'll interject there. So what Konstantin's talking about, who's the guy that's now speaking, he's talking about Russian New Year being really important. So if you go and listen to Reporting from Ukraine did a really good video on the mass missile strike. And he talked about how there are 3 elements to why they did that. And one is to control the narrative. So they've just had 74 people die and a ship being blown to smithereens, right? That didn't appear anywhere on the news. But in case that bad news does filter through some of the information channels, they need to overcome that with good news that the Russian propagandists and people on the social medias are gleefully talking about, shouting about. So that missile and drone attack is a way of controlling the narrative. It's also a way of getting good news out there in advance of New Year. So Putin does a speech on New Year, and that is like a big opportunity for another amplification of the Russian narrative. And so this feeds into that completely. It was also, a way of being able to target Ukrainian industrial military complex facilities. So if you look at a lot of things that were hit, we don't know really what was hit, but it looks like they were that, and they probably did hit a number of tank manufacturing facilities or component manufacturing facilities and other kind of industrial military complex warehouses and production plants. Anyway, to let them continue.
My personal belief that is done out of anger before that, for losing that ship, not because of anything else from the battlefield. So I don't think it's battlefield related personally, but of course these are only guesses.
Yeah, I don't. When I say linked to the battlefield, I don't necessarily mean that they're responding to what's going on in the front line necessarily, but more so that they're trying to control the narrative. I think the controlling the narrative appears to be one of Russia's really big priorities.
Yeah,
is they want people to talk about certain things, and they want to talk about them in certain contexts, and they're very good at manipulating people into doing it.
I think it's so important. So when you see the Russians push as much as they can, so when you've seen them succeed on the front line recently for the last month, right? My guess is that they are and this could act as a Pyrrhic victory, but the Ukrainians unfortunately will be unable to push back straight away afterwards. But I think the Russians are going to be pushing as far as they physically can and throwing everything and the kitchen sink into advancing until they can advance no more. And so this looks like the Russians have done really well, but the silver lining could be that that's all they can do. Actually, they will exhaust themselves fairly quickly. And I think Andrew Perpetua is kind of saying that with his frontline analysis, is that they are grinding to a halt again. And they have lost just a phenomenal amount of kit, but it's controlling the narrative. That means that in the New Year's speeches, Putin can say, hey, we're advancing on the front line. It's perfect timing. We're advancing, continuing on the front line. We've hammered the Ukrainians with missiles and drones, and look at us, aren't we marvelous? Quite what happens in January and February after that, and whether the Russians will have much more to bring to bear, depends really on whether they can crypto mobilize and whatnot. But I think this really is a lot about controlling the narrative.
Yeah, I just feel like that's what they're doing. Like that's the purpose of these missile strikes.
And I don't disagree. So let me know what you think. Anyway, go and check out Andrew Perpetua's fantastic work. He had a really good live stream last night. Reporting from Ukraine was a really good video from this morning. I'll be featuring both of them again in my analysis of the missile strikes that I'll do later. In the meantime, take care. Speak soon.